This week's comic book section is quite large. We have My Hero Academia hitting a milestone that is unexpected to the more casual fans of the franchise. There is a new power dynamic forming in the X-Men side of the Marvel Universe that we're going to discuss briefly. Plus, Garth Ennis, you know, the guy that brought us The Boys, he has a new book coming out that we're going to talk about, and quite a bit more as well. So let's do the thing. Hello, nerds, and welcome to this week's episode of The News as it pertains to comic books and books. No discussion of current storylines, story arcs, or any of those kind of details is going to happen here per se. I am, after all, a one-man organization and can't read every book that comes out and report on it and any of the news therein. But we can talk about new announcements and major changes as they pertain to any of the publishers that we follow, or just generally nerdy literary information in that sense. So let's get into all of that, shall we? And also, if you dig what's going on here, there is a much more up-to-date and possibly relevant, because it takes a second to get these sections posted up, so probably much more up-to-date version of the news in long form I like to call The Week in Nerddom over on the main channel, which you can find linked in the description as well as at the end of this video. That show covers many more points of interest in the nerd community, in the pop culture community at large, and so definitely go check that out. Now let's get into all of those literary notes, shall we? We have no follow-ups or corrections. We have no trailers, but we do have news in comic books and books. And it's a little bit big this week for comic books and books, so stick with me. But first up, we have the My Hero Academia thing. This one's actually going to be a little quick. Yeah, I know I teased it in both the main intro and the intro for the section. It's going to be quick. It's still slightly unexpected. My Hero Academia has ended. Me being an American, that just sounds weird to say about an ongoing story. So yeah, that's totally a thing. But after 10 years and 430 chapters, the My Hero Academia book has come to an end, which means the manga very likely has ends in sight, or the anime rather, has an end in sight as well, which again, just sounds so weird to me, but totally works. I wish it was more of or I guess less of a cultural thing and more just a comic book thing, that we got to the end of these stories and then we moved on with our lives and created new stories, because we have seen what happens with the main American comic book titles, and they tend to like flounder for a while and then just get really bad, and then maybe they'll get canceled, which canceled is not better than ending, right? Anyway, so yeah, My Hero Academia come to an end. I am not an active My Hero Academia reader, so more casual folk like me, this sounds weird, but apparently it was not that big of a surprise to the active fan base. So there you go. Next up, this one's going to be a little bit of a conversation and less of a news piece, though still kind of news if you're not currently reading the X-Men. There is a new power dynamic inside of the X-Men comic books. We talked about the new initiative that's launching all of these new books. We have a bunch of new teams. Very specifically, we're talking about the mainline books of the Uncanny X-Men and the X-Men. I forget precisely what the books are titled, because I really only have a simple line of notes saying, I'm going to read it to you. So Cyclops versus Rogue is the new Charles versus Magneto. That's the conversation we're having. All right, so let me frame this in an interesting way, because both Cyclops and Rogue have worked for both Professor X and Magneto. Both Charles and Magneto, Charles and Eric, I should say, both those characters have been good at some point. I don't know that Charles has ever been a villain per se. Like, he's been the antagonist to a certain degree of certain stories, but he's always been on the side of the heroes, whereas Magneto's kind of flip-flop on that. So that's the interesting dynamic there, though, is that they're both effectively going for similar goals. They just have different ways of getting there. Much like Batman and Superman both have the same goal. I mean, we're totally mixing our comic books here, right? Both have the same basic goal of, do good and stop people from doing bad. The Superman-Batman dynamic is Superman leads by example, Batman forces people into doing good out of fear. So different means to get to the end, right? But still the same basic ends. Charles and Magneto, you have Charles wants to integrate. Charles wants everyone to be in harmony and brotherly love, and just everything works together and nobody is placed above or below anyone else. Whereas Magneto, this is where it differs from the Batman analogy, but whereas Magneto wants to place mutant kind above humankind, he still wants a type of harmony though. He still wants he doesn't necessarily want death and all of the conflict. He just wants people to recognize their superiors in mutants, right? That's the way Magneto thinks. So that's the current dynamic, or that's the previous dynamic. Apparently what is happening, because I need to get back into the X-Men because I feel like it's getting better than it was, because it's been bad for a long time. Anyway, we have Rogue and Cyclops. Rogue being the one who is following more in Professor X's footsteps, in that she wants harmony. She wants everyone to just be integrated and no difference between human and mutant. Everybody is equal and the same. Whereas it seems that, and this is, I'm going by what I read, I'm going by conversations I've seen, I haven't actually read the books, I've just read about the books. But it's an interesting conversation to have nonetheless. We have Cyclops going the Magneto route, where he wants some sort of elevation. It's not exactly the Magneto, there's a lot more shades to this. There's a lot more middle ground in here, but he wants some sort of elevation for mutant kind. He wants mutants to be able to take care of mutants and not get any friction from humans, whereas Rogue just wants everyone to take care of everyone and not delineate between the two. So it's a really interesting conversation to have, because that's kind of it's not a strong allegory for what's going on currently in our popular socio-political situation, but there are some parallels to be drawn. Certain people want definitive lines drawn so that we can recognize those lines and then compensate based on those lines. And then other people, the other half of the argument is nobody wants the lines, everybody just wants to be together in harmony. So it's a really deep philosophical conversation, is which one's right. So that's one level of this conversation. The other level of this conversation is this dynamic change necessary? Do we need to go from the Charles versus Magneto argument and make it a little bit more nuanced into this Rogue versus Cyclops argument? I honestly think that both conversations could be had, but if we're only focusing on one, I think the one that kind of draws more parallels to modern socio-political issues is more appropriate, because it's the X-Men, and that's kind of the way the X-Men have always functioned. So I'm here for it if it's being done well. And again, I have to start reading the books again in order to decipher if it's being done well. Hopefully you will join me in reading at least some of these books now that they're starting anew. This is a good jumping on point if you haven't read X-Men for a while, then getting into this new, I forget exactly what the arc is called because it's not in the notes, because it's kind of secondary to the overall conversation we're having. So, but yeah, that's kind of the dynamic shift that's happening right now in the X-Men side of things, and I find it incredibly interesting. So let me know what you have to say on the subject. What am I missing? If you're actively reading these books right now, what am I missing that would be relevant to that conversation? Because I really think that's a good conversation to be having right now. That's what we've got though on that. Let's move over into the new Garth Ennis comic. So Garth Ennis has a new book called Babs. It will be coming out on, I did put this in the notes, written by Garth Ennis, illustrated by Jason Burrows. Ahoy Comics is who is publishing it. It will be released on August 14th of this year. So today, as I'm talking, is when it's releasing. This one is... This is super interesting. I mean, it's Garth Ennis. I'm a big Garth Ennis fan. If you're not, you should read The Boys. Also, he did Preacher. I'm totally brain farting that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. ADHD is a pain in the ass sometimes. I know things, and then they just kind of go, phew, and then I forget. Anyway, so yeah, it is a parody of the fantasy genre. The main character, obviously, Babs. Babs has a talking sword named Barry. Barry has a mouth like what is the Billy Butcher. That's what his name is. I took better notes this time. It has a mouth like Billy Butcher, so again, totally Garth Ennis style, because Billy Butcher is a character created by Garth Ennis. This is basically just going to be poking fun and kind of breaking down this genre, much like he did in The Boys with the superhero genre. So yeah, pretty freaking awesome. Release date, like I said, is going to be August 14th, so today. It is Jason Burrows. Jason Burrows and Garth Ennis have both worked together before on The Punisher. If you read the Garth Ennis Punisher run, then you've seen Burrows' work. It is like I said, also produced by Ahoy Comics, so go check it out. At least rifle through it at the comic book shop next time you're in, but probably pick it up because Garth Ennis is great. Our next one is another new book. We have a new book called Young Nomads. So this is a sign of the current state of comic books. This is an independent release. Battle Quest Comics is releasing a new fantasy title. It looks similar. The artwork makes the characters look very similar to the characters in Dune, so that's kind of the big thing that caught my eye. But it is a comment on the current state of comic books, that something like this, that is, the art is not exactly the best art, but it looks like an interesting story. That something like this can be so widely covered. I saw this on two pretty big comic book media news outlet sites. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I'm just going to read what I've got. So fantasy title, The Young Nomads, created by writer-artist Stefano Corticelli. Series follows a group of young heroes, each with unique abilities, as they navigate a mystical world filled with magic, mythical creatures, and ancient secrets. So this is going to be, it again looks kind of sci-fi, but really is a lot of fantasy elements. Story takes place in a realm where powerful magical artifacts have been stolen, plunging the world into chaos, and the young nomads embark on a quest to retrieve the artifacts and restore balance to the realm. With a diverse cast of characters, including Lyra, Kale, Zephyr, and Mira, vibrant, dynamic artwork, the young nomads promises to be an exciting adventure. The first issue is set to release August 22nd, so next week. Yeah, just looks pretty interesting. Let's broaden our comic book horizons, shall we? Now, there's more than just Marvel and DC, guys. Next up, speaking of Marvel and DC, we're going back over to Marvel. We have a new sidekick for the Scarlet Witch, sidekick named Amaranth. Amaranth is a new character being introduced, injected even into these books. Just looked really interesting to me. Again, I think we're taking a turn for the better when it comes to Marvel books. Amaranth was working with Agatha. Now she is the Scarlet Witch's protege. She is Wanda Maximoff's protege. So interesting situation going on with the next generation of characters. Maybe this time they'll get it right, because the last time they tried to introduce us to a next generation of characters in Marvel, it went over very badly. So it looks like they're learning from their mistakes, and that's why we're talking about this. That, though, is the end of our regular ass news for comic books and books. Let's talk about some suggestions this week. Suggestion this week is not a comic book, but it is a book series, and we're talking about The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I have about 16 of them. I have about 10 or 12 of them. There are 14 books in the proper series. I think there are a couple of side books as well, because I'm pretty sure I have those. But as far as the main, the Wheel of Time books, they are fantastic. This is the day in, day out kind of fantasy work that I think everyone should have an appreciation for. It's not the super silly, I can't even think of the name of the author. It's not the super silly stuff that is really for the hardcore whimsical fans of the genre. This is Tolkien light, I think, is a fair way to put this. And that's not really a put down. This is the breadth of work here is much more involved. There's a lot more stuff here to get into, because Tolkien only wrote those 4 or 5 books if you count Hobbit and the Silmarillion, but still 5 compared to 14 is a little different. But yeah, The Wheel of Time, if you've never read it, start with book 1, absolutely start with book 1, and then work your way through the series, and you will not regret it. I am myself still currently working my way through the series. So that being said, that is your suggestion for the week. That brings us to the end of the video, nerds. Thank you very much for joining me for the news. Once again, there is a full and probably much more up-to-date and recent episode of the news, the full-length version, if you will, called The Week in Nerddom over on the main channel, linked down in the description, and probably link popping up somewhere around my face right about now. So click on that, go check that out as well, or if you prefer your news in more truncated pieces, then by all means just stick around here and go check out some of the other stuff we offer on this channel. Thank you very much for joining me. We will see you in the next one. Before we go, always remember, nerds, that if it is generally nerdy, it's probably here.